Hey everybody, it's Eric from the MMG. Welcome to our channel. Glad to have you here. Consider joining us through our Discord, links in the video description. Join our channel, become a channel member, support what we do here at the MMG. Today we're talking Hytale and how to get the best performance out of your machine so you can enjoy the game to the maximum capability. So we're going to start with the graphic preset. This is going to be the most common fix for most people, and it's the easiest to mess with. The graphic preset is here in your video settings for your Hytale once you load up the game. And you're going to see it down in the second tab. So, if the general is the first tab, rendering the second tab, this is where you want to be. And you can set to defaults down here at the bottom if you've messed with this before and you want to start fresh. Or if you mess with it and then it starts working worse, this is where you can reset it to defaults. But anyways, let's get back up here. What I would recommend everybody do, if you're not sure what your system can do, is start out with the recommended defaults and then work your way down. So if you're having performance issues on Epic, go to low, go to high, then go to medium, then go to low. And what this does is you'll see it changes all the settings underneath of it. So if I switch this to low, now all the world details, AA, shadow quality, all that stuff has changed to match it. We're going to break these down a little bit more in detail, but this is the easiest way change a bunch of settings and to check your performance at different levels. All right, next up, we're going to talk about full screen versus window mode. This is at the very top here. Typically, full screen is what most people are going to want to play on. That is dedicating not all your resources, but the majority of your resources to your game itself. And when you do it in window mode, it takes away from that. So that is if you're trying to multitask, if you're trying to stream, if you're trying to, listen to music in the background, all that stuff, that's going to give those resources more of your system resources than just your game itself. And I've seen this fix a lot of weird issues. So I always recommend it to people if they're telling me, hey, my game's lagging, it's stuttering really bad. I always tell them to put it in windowed mode. And then once you're in window mode, you can hit the button to maximize it. And it's still almost using, the majority of your monitor. So it's very easy to play in window mode. And so I always recommend people check that out. All right, next up we're going to talk about is VSYNC. So VSYNC is designed to stop screen tearing by locking your FPS on your monitor's refresh rate. The downside of this is it adds input lag and can cause some big drops at FPSs. So if your system, has an issue where it can't stay locked, for performance-focused gameplay, I always recommend turning VSYNC off. If the screen tearing really bothers you, because that's what it stops, then you can turn it back on and it's fine. But just so you know, you're basically trading responsiveness for smoothness. So, all right, next setting is going to be the unlimited FPS here. So this is going to remove the frame cap rate and it lets your system push as many frames as it can. So this can make the game feel more responsive, especially on high-end refresh rate monitors. If you have 144, even one of the newer, higher ones than that, then this is going to make the game feel more responsive. The downside is it increases your resources that you're dedicating to the game, to your graphics card. It has to work a lot harder, a lot more power usage from your power supply. So I always recommend you cap this personally, I always cap mine at 144 because I don't really feel like there's a huge benefit past that. Maybe there is. Please let me know in the comments below. I don't have any of the newer monitors with the higher refresh rate other than 144. Maybe people do notice a difference. To me, 144 was where I would set everything and still is if I'm messing with that setting. All right, next up is view distance. And this is one of the big ones a lot of people have been having issues with in Hytale. So if this particular game you're having issues with, look at this setting as your next step. So this basically determines how far into the game that it renders terrain, structures, and other graphical entities. This is definitely going to be a huge performance hit for this game. So the higher the view distance looks, it looks great, right? It's cool being able to see far away, but it puts a really heavy load on both your CPU and your GPU. So even if you're lagging in one of the areas, maybe you have a great graphics card, but your processor's a couple generations old. That could really affect your performance, or vice versa. So if you're experiencing stutters or frame drops, try lowering the view distance. It's going to be one of the fastest ways to improve your performance in Hytale. All right, next we're going to talk about is render scale. So render scale determines the resolution the game is actually rendering at before it gets scaled to your screen. So lowering this can drastically boost your FPS with very little visually lost on your end. So this is another good one to drop if you're having issues. So dropping this slightly is going to be my recommendations, and then you keep dropping it more and more to test it if you're still having performance issues. Next up is world details. This controls how complex the environment looks. This includes, geometry details, object complexity, the higher settings. It can make the world really, really look rich and refined, but it can also put a huge increased workload on your CPU. So if you're noticing dips in, the busier areas of the game, like the towns or stuff that, big structures, then this could really be what's causing that. And you just can lower down your world detail. There's, lowest, low, medium, high, and maximum. All right, next up is AA or anti-aliasing. This smooths out the jagged edges on objects, so it makes it look better, right? It was a huge thing a couple generations back. Oh, my graphics card doesn't support this, and now my graphics card does, and now graphics look amazing. And it's came a long way, but it still has some performance issues. So if you have it on, obviously the lower you have the setting, the less resource intense. And the settings here for me and my card are low FXAA and then high TAA. So and it's a little bit tricky because if you switch to epic and then you switch to high, you'll see it goes to low. But if you go back to low, then it switches AA to high. So it's trying to keep your graphics look as best as they can on the settings, because honestly, AA at this point doesn't have a huge impact as the other stuff does. So if you have everything at low, but you have good AA on anti-aliasing, then it can clean up some of the graphics and make it look a little bit better. So play with this, and see yourself what the best performance is for you. Next up, shadow quality. This is another one that used to be very impactful. Back when before games had shadows, you didn't have to worry about this. Then they started to, oh my gosh, now we can render shadows. And I know at the beginning it was very, very resource intense to get shadows to work and move and look correct. Now they've really came a long way with shadows, so this isn't necessarily as big of an issue for most people. At least it shouldn't be, but it's there, so you can change it. This is going to determine how detailed the graphics look. How much resources are dedicated to rendering those and making them look rich and realistic, and it's going to affect a lot of the objects, like the lighting in Hytale. So lowering shadow quality and turning it down, it can result in a noticeable FPS gain, especially if you're having issues. So it's something to mess with and check out. All right, next up is particle quality. So this affects things like magic effects, dust, explosions during combat, or just in busy scenes when particles can really hurt performance. I always think of like when the sun's coming up, and you see a lot of games will do this now. You'll see the dusk, like coming up with the sun, and all that rendering stuff like that can really slow down your machine. And you'll notice that, like, oh, the sun's coming up, now my game's running like poo. That's probably a particle quality issue, and you can change that setting here. They have the same settings here. They have a high, and then they have a medium setting that you can adjust. All right, next up is shading quality. Shading quality controls how lighting and surfaces interact with each other. So this is higher shading adds depth and realism, but it also increases your GPU load. So if you have an older graphics card, you may look at lowering this down. And again, I think this one has also low, medium, and high for it. All right, next up is bloom. Bloom adds a glow effect. So anything that's a bright source, so like the sun coming up, like I was mentioning, or like a lantern at nighttime. This is, yeah, and it's this is purely cosmetic, which most of the stuff is. So it doesn't always tank your performance, but again, I've definitely seen it cause a lot of issues. So if you're noticing that when the bloom effects are coming into play at nighttime, when you're around a lantern, anything like that, then they can definitely be caused by bloom. And you can come in, and again, you can turn it completely off, low, medium, or high setting. All right, sun shafts. So sun shafts they often call these God rays. So this is the light beams that are created when the sun shines through objects. So this is again the sunrise particle effect, looking through a tree basically. So that all these things being affected by lighting and shadows, and that's why I often will use the reference of when the sun is coming up, it's trying to do all these different things, and so it can really affect performance, and it can be hard to track down which one, if it's a combination, but it's all pulling a bunch of extra resources at once to do these effects, and so it can really cause a lot of issues. But so it looks really cool, sun shafts do, but they are, I would say, an expensive pleasure. So disabling these can improve your performance greatly. So you can have these off or on. All right, next up is foliage fading. So this one it controls how quickly like grass, plants, and small details in the game disappear at a distance. So lowering this can significantly improve performance in forest and in open biomes. So you still have plenty of visual details close to you still, which is really what matters, right? But when you start to run away from things, it'll start to fade. So basically, your distance, if you have high distance up, view distance, it's not going to quite look as pretty if you have foliage fading on. So that's a setting you can adjust as and kind of play with to see what is the right setting for you. All right, depth buffer precision. So this affects how the game handles depth. So object layering at long distances is what it's really talking about. Higher precision improves visual accuracy, but it also is going to increase your GPU workload. So for most players, a medium setting is more than enough, and it'll help you avoid unnecessary performance issues that you could have. And you have this on low or high is the options. All right, that is it. That wraps up all the settings. Hopefully, this is going to help you kind of understand what these do and help get you to fine tune your Hytale experience, get it looking as good as possible and running as good as possible on your particular machine. Thanks for hanging out with me. This is Eric from the MMG. I would love to have your support with us. Subscribe to the channel, become a channel member, join our Discord. Let's talk Hytale and many more games. Thanks for hanging out and have yourself a great day.